On the 4th of June 1807, something of great importance took place where I'm walking here in London. While the rest of the city lay in darkness, as did the rest of Britain, this area was suddenly brightly lit. For the first time ever, people could walk around at night as though it was daylight. So what had happened? Well, as a demonstration, Britain's first gas-powered street lamps had been turned on, and crowds of people came to witness the spectacle. In this episode of The History of London, we'll be looking at how the production of gas allowed London streets to be lit up, which forever changed people's lives. In this video, we'll be hearing about the history of gas lamps, why it is so important to preserve them as they are, and who maintains them. Stay with us until the end and you'll learn about some of the best examples of gas lamps you can find for yourself. If you keep your eyes open, you can still discover hundreds of examples of beautiful street lamps in London. Many have been converted to electricity, but a surprising number still run on gas. That first event in June 1807 was simply a demonstration, staged outside the home of the Prince Regent to mark the birthday of his father, King George III. But it was such a success that more gas lamps were soon erected along the surrounding streets of Pall Mall and the Mall, and eventually throughout London and beyond. There are still many gas-powered lamps around London if you know where to look. You can find some in quaint alleyways and others in some of London's busiest streets. Many are very old, much older than electric street lights. And an increasing number are listed and preserved as structures of historic interest, as we'll hear later in this video. Look closely at London's gas lamps and you'll see on some the name Sugg. The involvement in London's street lighting of the Sugg family probably goes back to that very first demonstration in 1807, and the name is still important in the preservation and maintenance of Britain's historic street lamps. So who better to explain the history of gas and lamps than family member Chris Sugg, who has had a long involvement in street lighting. Chris begins by taking us right back to the discovery of gas as a fuel, and will also explain his family's involvement in gas lights.
The story of gaslighting is a long one, and of course this is a naturally occurring substance. But we start here with a picture of Thomas Shirley, who is musing over natural gas wells that appeared near Wigan in 1659. Although the story goes back much further than this, it is interesting to think that natural vegetation rotting produces these gases, and some of them get caught up inside coal. So it all becomes a story of how you get gas from coal in due course. And in 1686, we have a Reverend Clayton demonstrating the production of gas by using a kettle into which he had put some coal and a pipe attached to the spout, found that he could light gas being produced from coal in what became called a retort. This, however, simply became of interest to all his friends and neighbours rather than anything of a use. William Murdoch, a Scot who was employed by Boulton and Watt, was working for them in Redruth in Cornwall, and he had been convinced of the possibilities that gas from coal could offer, and he built in the back garden of his house in 1792 a retort in which he could heat the coal, and he lit various gas burners, much to the surprise of local neighbours. However, his employees, despite his protestations that this ought to be a patented item, were not interested, even though when he went back to Birmingham, he had managed to light various industrial buildings with gas lighting, including some of their own, allowing them to run for much more time after dark and to be safer. Just to take a quick look back at what it was like before the street lighting, there's this picture of Night by William Hogarth in 1738, which typifies the conditions of life in London before any real street lighting, showing collisions of vehicles and people hiding under various places. not a nice life. The link boy was employed to lead their charges. He just had a torch burning, which he used as a guide for his customer. And even this was somewhat of a concern because he could have been threatened or bribed to bring a customer to a place where they could be assaulted and have valuables stolen. The snuffers used to turn out or to snuff the torch can still be seen on many period properties where the link boy could put out his torch after safe arrival. In London, a German called Windsor, who had been working in Paris with Le Bon, had learnt his trade from Le Bon, who was making gas from wood, decided that the UK had a lot of coal and that he could go to London and persuade people to invest in a company to provide piped gas for many lights. And so you find him demonstrating gas lighting at the Lyceum Theatre in 1803-4, which got everybody excited. One of the problems was that his English was not too good, so he had a translator, and this translator didn't always turn up, so it left the audience a little bemused. And in addition, his production of gas on the stage was extremely smelly, so people were not too impressed from that point of view. But on the other hand, everybody became interested in this as he was making amazing suggestions about what money might be made from this whole process. Windsor decided that he should make a bigger splash of his gas lighting and set out to demonstrate with a display fed from 2 retorts in his home in Pall Mall via Carlton House Terrace. In order to achieve this, he obviously needed pipe work, and this is where we are told by William Sugg that his grandfather, Thomas Sugg, was involved. Thomas, being an ironmonger, obviously knew how to make pipes and connect them together, and this was done in time for George III's birthday. Excited so many people who stood for hours watching these demonstrations that a demonstration of street lighting of Pall Mall is considered to be the beginnings of street lighting by gas.
Following Windsor's demonstration on the birthday of George III, permanent streetlights were erected along Pall Mall. As new lamps were erected, a larger facility was needed to produce the gas, so in 1812 royal assent was given for the formation of the Gas, Light and Coke Company. They created a gasworks at Great Peter Street to the south of Westminster Abbey. Their gasworks grew until it filled the entire area south to Horseferry Road. The company laid pipes to the nearby Houses of Parliament, but even before that could be lit, their first paying customer in November 1813 was St John's Church at Smith Square. That same year, Westminster Bridge was illuminated with gas lamps to great approval from the public. And by 1815, the pipe network had extended to Covent Garden, where, in September 1815, the Covent Garden Theatre, the predecessor of the current Royal Opera House, was illuminated by gas. Competitors soon sprang up, and very quickly there were other gas companies supplying London, such as the City of London Gas Light Company and the South London Gas Light and Coke Company. By 1850 there were 13 companies lighting over 30,000 street lamps in the capital. Nevertheless, the Gas Light and Coke Company remained the largest supplier of gas in London, and in the second half of the century acquired many of its competitors. The original gasworks at Westminster remained open until 1875. Laying gas pipes below a street must have already been a familiar sight to Londoners when in 1834 the artist George Schaff drew this sketch of workmen. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, huge circular gas holders were a familiar sight in London. They have largely disappeared or are being put to other uses, but here are the remains of some that still stand, old and rusting, at Bromley by Bow in East London. In 1870, the Gas Light and Coke Company opened a huge production facility on the Thames near East Ham, which they named Beckton, after the company's governor, Simon Adams Beck. Beckton was the largest gasworks in Britain, and possibly in the world, with its own internal railway system. The Gas Light and Coke Company was nationalised in 1949, becoming North Thames Gas. That in turn was privatised in 1986, forming part of British Gas. Just by those gas holders at Bromley by Bow is one of London's secret gems, a memorial garden to the workers of the Gaslight and Coke Company who were killed in the First and Second World Wars, which contains a beautiful, continuously burning gas lamp. I mentioned that the Gaslight and Coke Company were initially located in Westminster, and some years later a new company was set up close by to produce gas lamps, as Chris Sugg will explain.
William Sugg decided to start a business, and this delightful picture is the factory in Marsham Street, which they worked from 1837 to 1866. And here are the two Suggs involved. William Sugg, the founder, 1803 to 1860, and his son Thomas, William Thomas, who obviously took the name from his grandfather, who is the one who lives throughout the Victorian era. His father, William, the founder, died of cholera in one of the epidemics of the time, and William found himself running the business in his early 20s, but was always a person of great effort. And very soon, by 1866, they had to move to Regency Street, where this picture shows the new Vincent works. And you can see, in particular, the lamps in both the window and hanging up. And this shows you just how large lamps were at the time. And the evolution of gaslighting burners is a significant one. William Sugg had a lot to do with. So we go from a simple jet with a flame to a flat flame where the light comes off sideways and not edgeways. And then we have the argan burner, which is like an oil lamp. It's a circular burner. And we have several others before we come to the gas mantle. The William Sugg business in Westminster was, of course, ideally located for work, not only in the city itself, but they got heavily involved in the new bridge of Tower Bridge. And here you can see a picture of the William Sugg foreman, who's the man with the bowler hat in the middle of the section, who must have had quite a job on his hands, because they not only made and supplied all the lamps, including special big ones, which were to light the water when the bascules went up, but they did all of the plumbing and the hydraulics for lifting the bascules. So a tremendous job. Interestingly, only 7 years later, they relit the lighting by gas again, but with a high-pressure gas-mantled burners. The interesting thing about the Tower Bridge story is that you can go into the towers and see two of each of the types, one on the posts and one on the wall brackets, in either of the towers, still retained. You can see in this illustration of the famous Windsor lamp that was first made in 1898 and was designed specifically for the gas mantle that it states in 1906 over 50,000 lamps are now in use. And when you think that's only 7 years, 50,000 lamps largely made by hand is quite an effort.
As Chris has mentioned, gas lighting evolved over time. And meanwhile, for decades, inventors struggled to produce an electric bulb that was as reliable and cost-effective as gas. In the 1860s, London's Metropolitan Board of Works created the Thames embankments as part of a huge new sewer scheme. The new embankments were illuminated by beautiful cast-iron gas lamps, and the lamp posts are still in place. In 1878, the Avenue de l'Opéra in Paris was lit by electric lamps, and that didn't go unnoticed in London. In most of the London area, street lighting was the responsibility of local vestries, but the embankments gave the Metropolitan Board of Works the possibility of converting their gas lamps to electricity. But electric bulbs proved to be unreliable, however, and in 1884 the lamps reverted back to gas. The American entrepreneur Thomas Edison then opened a coal-powered electricity generating station here at Holborn Viaduct for the viaduct's lamps, but in those early days the lighting was harsh and the lamps required continuous maintenance. A breakthrough was eventually made by the English physicist Joseph Swan, who created the carbon fibre filament incandescent bulb. But he produced his bulbs on a small scale from his home, and it was only after he went into partnership with the more entrepreneurial Edison in 1883 that electric light bulbs were mass-produced in Britain. When electric lighting eventually became as reliable as gas, the lamps along the embankment were once again converted to electricity, and this splendid generating station was built beside Embankment Tube Station. Nevertheless, despite the introduction of electric street lamps, gas lighting was so well established that it continued as a major source of illumination throughout the first half of the 20th century.
In a book called Daylight by Night, published in 1931, the interesting statement is that 4/5 of the streets in Great Britain are illuminated by gas. So the industry is really still relying upon gas lighting for its existence, and yet we are coming towards the Second World War. Pictures in the book show how the gas is used with effect all over the famous streets of London and the main roads of provincial cities. In 2007, Westminster City Council decided that the history of gas lighting should be recorded with a green plaque, and in Pall Mall one was unveiled for the Windsor story. And further down the road, a plaque was unveiled for the Gaslight and Coke Company, which was founded in 1813 in Marsham Street in Westminster, which is next door to where the original William Sugg business was founded too. So we now have a plaque on each of these buildings, and Westminster is quite clearly the first city in the world to have lighting by gas and the first gasworks.
The Sugg Company continued into the 20th century, passing through 2 more generations of the family, and with Chris's father introducing the famous halcyon warm air appliances after the Second World War to replace the dwindling demand for gas street lighting. In 1969, a takeover threatened the very existence of the historic name, but Chris started again with Sugg Lighting, which has now been rebranded with the original William Sugg name. Old lamps and lampposts can survive for extremely long periods, but will eventually need to be either refurbished or be replicated. Somewhere that takes place is the new William Sugg & Company at Horsham, with Chris Sugg acting as its historic consultant. Chris and I visited their workshop in Horsham, where they were able to show me work taking place on various lamps. There we met the company's Neil Stanton.
So we have traditional skills here, but we also have more modern day skills such as our product designer, and he will take something like this lantern and he will put it onto our CAD drawings, and then we can work with both our team here and our third party suppliers to actually create and replicate a heritage lantern so that they can have exactly the same thing but made more modern. So this is a lantern that's actually from St James's Church, Piccadilly, and we have a large bow bracket.
Yep.
So we've had to strip the lantern completely down because it wasn't clear what it was made of and how it was all manufactured, and we actually need to make a replica of this and a replica of the bow bracket.
Right.
And then they're building a new entrance on the church, on the other side of the church.
Yeah.
So that will take pride of place over the new entrance, and this will be restored and go back over the existing entrance, which will be lovely.
Yes.
Really lovely.
No, lovely.
There's plenty more to come. We'll be hearing why gas lamps are important and the campaign to save them. We'll meet the Lamplighters who continue to maintain them. And we'll finish by looking at some of London's best examples. In the meantime, please let me ask you to click like and perhaps leave a comment. And also consider subscribing to get notifications of future videos. Check out the History of London YouTube channel to discover more videos in this series. We heard earlier how Westminster was the first place in the world to produce gas and have gas street lighting. But as the council were commemorating their historical connection, they were also converting gas lamps throughout the borough to electricity. Let's now hear about the campaign to save Westminster's gas lamps.
It all started for me on the top of the good old-fashioned London double-decker bus. I was doing some Christmas shopping with my wife, and we were returning home from Covent Garden. And I looked out of the window and I pointed out an old gas lamp outside Westminster Abbey. and said, there's a gas lamp. And she was amazed. And I then Googled it to prove to her that there are gas lamps still left in London. And to my horror, I discovered that Westminster Council intended to replace all of their historic gas lamps with reproductions powered by LED. And what was more, they were starting in 2 weeks' time. So we returned home, and it sounds really weird, but I had a sleepless night, and I sort of tossed and turned, and I just thought, this is just awful. A really important part of London's history is about to bite the dust. I'm a writer, and I write about cultural history, and I was very active on Instagram and social media. So I wrote an initial post about the gas lamps, which was great because it put me in touch with all sorts of people. And somebody got in touch with me and said, well, go and have a chat with Tim Briers, because he had already been campaigning to save the gas lamps that summer when he realised that Westminster Council were about to change all the lamps. So I went to see Tim Briers, and we got on very, very well, and we decided to join forces and become the London Gasketeers.
It all started in June 2021 for me. I looked out of my shop doorway, and there was some council workmen digging up the street in front of the shop. And of course, I was really just worried they were going to dig into my basement. So I asked them what they were doing, and they casually replied they were just seeing how easy it would be to convert our gas lamps to electric ones, which of course set the alarm bells ringing. So I phoned the Victorian Society, I phoned the architectural historian Dan Cruikshank. Nobody seemed to have heard anything. And it soon became clear that Westminster Council hadn't really been consulting anyone before beginning to remove gas lamps from places like Broadcourt and Martlet Court. And that's when the campaign got going. We set up the London Gasketeers to save the 300 or so gas lamps which were owned by Westminster City Council. As things turned out, it was about 50 of them had already been removed, so we've really been talking about saving 250 lamps. But originally we thought there were 300. There are still over 1,000 working gas lamps spread across London, outside Westminster Abbey, in the royal parks, around the Inns of Court and the Temple. But we were focused on the Westminster lamps, which were under immediate threat.
So I then set up a social media account on Instagram, and we took off. We managed to gain about 4,000 followers very, very quickly. And it soon became apparent that everybody, people from all walks of life, really cared about the gas lamps. And we were then joined by Tim Gadbury and Carla Salvatore, who were incredibly helpful with the website and photography.
I was enormously grateful for the early support of Dan Cruikshank and also Simon Callow, who's long been a friend of Cecil Court. And then, of course, we had input later on from Griff Rhys-Jones, the president of the Victorian Society. So it really helps when you've got people on your side like that. And we were very lucky to have widespread media coverage. You never know how these things are going to take off, but we were covered by just about all of the major papers, the Mail, the Telegraph, the Guardian, the Times, and it was all very positive. We've been on the BBC, we've been on French and Indian and American TV news. To our surprise, it became a matter of global interest.
And we had people from all walks of life getting in touch with us and saying that they really loved them and they were so important and it was crucial that they were saved. And I think the reason for this is gas lamps are in London's DNA. I say that, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but I think it's true. And you think back to literature and to film, to Mary Poppins, to Sherlock Holmes, to My Fair Lady, and we have a romantic image of London, which I think is so important, and I think it really matters.
Gaslight is really distinctive. It's a rich, warm, beautiful light, and I think that how streets and buildings are lit are important. So right here in our bookshop in Cecil Court was rebuilt in the 1890s. It's always been gas-lit, and this particular form of light is part of its history, part of its identity. There are other reasons too.
Westminster was the first place in the world to introduce gas street lighting back in 1807, so I think it's particularly important that we preserve it here. And people come to London, people live in London, we work in London because we like the real thing. We don't come to look at replicas. So it's much better to preserve original working examples of this technology rather than modern approximations of what it might have looked like. That's important too. It's also the jobs and the skills of the Lamplighters. And it's also the fact that this is a technology which revolutionised urban life. It completely changed the way people live. So preserving original examples where it began, on the street for everyone to see, is part of everyone's history.
In the modern world, we're all very busy and we all walk around on the street with our heads in our mobiles. And I think the pleasure that people can get from just looking up and taking in their surroundings and appreciating London's rich tapestry, I think it's so important. And that was very much with the London Gasketeers. One of our aims of the campaign was just to get people to look around and appreciate the built environment and to walk on the streets, but to walk around your immediate area where you work or where you live and appreciate your surroundings. And the gas lights are so important from that point of view. The light that they give off, their connection with London's history, the atmosphere that the lamps produce. So I think this was very much an important part of our campaign.
Westminster Council advanced several arguments for why they wanted to get rid of the gas lamps, including cost, lack of expertise to maintain them, environmental issues. We dealt with each one in turn. In terms of cost, to replace the gas lamps, they'd allocated £3 million to convert 300 lamps, or fewer than 300 lamps, to electricity, which were costing them probably less than £90,000 a year to maintain as they are. The council also argued that there were very few people who could maintain the lamps, that there was a lack of spare parts, that the technology was nearing the end of its useful life. But in fact there's a dedicated team of British gas lamplighters with a mountain of spare parts, and it's actually a very robust technology which has been tried and tested over many decades. As soon as you mention gas and gas lamps, of course people worry about the environment. And again, that was one of Westminster Council's arguments, that the gas lamps were not environmentally friendly. But once you start looking into it, you very quickly realise that the gas lamps individually use tiny, tiny amounts of gas. They're actually very efficient. And one of Westminster Council's early claims was that the 300 or so gas lamps were the equivalent of 40 return flights to Sydney, which sounds terrifying. It sounds like 40 jumbo jets. Using their figures and digging into it thoroughly, we soon realised that they were talking about 40 individual passengers. And when we looked into it properly and took account of things like contrails, we worked out that the keeping all of the gas lamps on is the equivalent of just 18 economy flights, return flights to Sydney. The amount of gas being used by the lamps is statistically negligible. And indeed, you could achieve the same effect far more easily by removing 40 patio heaters from around Westminster. Gaslight was originally designed to mimic sunlight. It's one of the reasons, if you look up at a gaslight and you look away, you won't have those little spots dancing in front of your eyes. It's also surprisingly good for wildlife. It's one of the claims, the reasons which Phoenix Park in Dublin, where they have about 300 gas lamps, it's part of their claim to being a dark skies oasis. It doesn't disrupt the circadian rhythms of bats and bugs and other nocturnal wildlife, or indeed, you won't hear birds tweeting in the trees at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking it's still daylight. So there are actually very good reasons for maintaining gas lighting. Westminster Council agreed to launch a series of public consultations which were very well attended by people who supported the gas lights. And they also, I know, they told me they had over 1,250 detailed written responses from all around the world. I know that they came from as far afield as Adelaide and Charleston and even Sofia in Bulgaria, with people writing and saying, these gas lamps don't just belong to you, they belong to all of us. These are the reasons why we come to London. And eventually the council suggested that they would keep more of the lamps than they were originally going to, because there were over 100 lamps which were listed already, and then they suggested that we kept another 36 of them. And at that point we said, well, why don't we apply to Historic England, and we get all of that. We apply for the listing, we leave it down to Historic England. If the lamps are worthy of being listed, they'll be listed, and then they're going to be safe forever. And that's what we've been doing for 18 months or so. We've been preparing and submitting detailed written listings for every single surviving gas lamp in Westminster, and so far most of them have been listed.
Many of London's surviving gas lamps are maintained by a dedicated team from British Gas. Unlike the past, they no longer actually light the lamps each evening, but the British Gas team are still known as the Lamplighters. I visited their workshop at Battersea to learn about what they actually do.
So I'm Dave Moody, I'm the Operational Heritage Manager for British Gas. So I have the honour to look after the London Lamplighters. So as a business, we look after 1,100 gas lamps across central London. There's approximately 1,400 left in London, and we have the honour of looking after 1,100 of them. So we've got around 400 in the Royal Parks, about 300 through Westminster, about 200 in the Temple, 60 in Westminster Abbey, and the rest are dotted over various locations across London. So it's the job of my team and myself is to go around, maintain them, keep them at a high standard. So we look after all them monthly. So we'll go around and do a service every month on a lot of them, checking the time. So a lot of our lamps are mechanically timed. So we have to go around every 2 weeks and wind them up, like your old clocks. We have some digital clocks as well, so we have to go around and change their daylight saving times and change the batteries. Yeah, general maintenance, looking after making sure that they come on when they're supposed to, making sure they're burning correctly, they're safe, make sure the mantles are all good working order. So yeah, that's basically, in a nutshell, that is our job. So just to point out, these are some of our lamp types that we look after. These three here at the end, so you've got a Grosvenor, it's called a Grosvenor lamp, that's a Windsor lamp, and the big one at the back, they're called Rochesters. They're our three most common lamps we look after, the most popular, I would say, or most common. The one to the left of them, the sort of squarish shape, that's a backlit lamp, so that would have been used primarily back doors of pubs, back doors of anywhere a tradesman would go in, so it's like a tradesman lamp we call it. And the big boy at the top, that's called a Westminster. So that would be one of your big lamps you see, but there's not many of them left now, unfortunately, because they've all been taken down or knocked down. So a gas lamp is a very, I use the word basic in a nice term. It's very simple. Gas comes off the street or through a meter or say off the street, depending on where they're situated. It comes up into a governor, which regulates it down to about 16 millibar of gas pressure. It then goes up through a solenoid, which is controlled by either a mechanical clock or a digital clock. And obviously when the clock gets its on or off time, it'll either open or close a solenoid. There'll be a permanent pilot, so a bit like your old natural draft, natural balance flue boilers. The permanent pilot, gas will go up the middle, down through the nozzles, and it will disperse around the mantle, and that will then light off the pilot. And that's when the mantles will then glow, and you'll get the Dickensian glow off of them. So they're very, very, very basic machine, a bit like an old boiler, but they're very, very efficient.
I then walked around London's Royal Parks with Aaron, one of the British Gas Lamplighters who maintain the majority of London's gas lamps. He's a popular character, and I was amazed at how many people stopped to say hello or ask him questions about his work. Aaron parked up his van and then walked around the parks, carrying his ladder to climb each of the many lamps.
I'm Aaron. I'm a British Gas lamplighter. I've been doing this job for 4 years, but I've been with British Gas for 24 years. And lucky enough to look after the last remaining gas lamps. Yeah, so my day-to-day routine is I go around and check all the lamps. They get serviced every 2 weeks. So I have to go around and wind up the clocks, check them, make sure the mantles are in good condition, make sure the glass isn't broken, and make sure they're in good condition. Yeah, it's a really great job. It's a privilege to do this job because there's only 4 of us who actually do this now. And working around London, so many people come to find us to tell us stories about their family. There used to be at one time up to 50,000 lamplighters in and around the UK. So somebody in your family's probably been a lamplighter. So they've always come to find us, tell us their nan, their granddad after the war was a lamplighter or during the war was a lamplighter. So it's a really good job, and it's pleasing, you know, you can make people's days talking about their family and what I do now and what their family used to do.
Gas lamps come in many shapes and sizes, and I've yet to see one that isn't quite delightful. It's certainly worth keeping your eyes open for them as you walk around, particularly in central London. A good way to discover London's beautiful and historic gas lamps is to join a walking tour, such as that led by Helen of Elan Walks. The walks normally take place in the darker evenings of the winter months. I'll put a link in the video description. So let's end with Helen showing us just a few of London's beautiful and unusual gas lamps.
Hello, I'm Helen, creator of Elan Walks, and I'd like to show you some of my favourite gas lamps of London. You'll be surprised to know that they are hidden in plain sight all around central London and also in some of the surrounding boroughs too. Gas lamps still light many areas of London today, from Westminster Abbey to gentlemen's clubs, the Royal Parks, and even some private homes. Here we are in Carting Lane, and behind me is a Joseph Webb sewer destructor lamp. Now, some people will say that it's powered by sewer gas, but it isn't. It's an early form of air conditioning, and one of these lamps could clear 3/4 of a mile of sewer, taking out the noxious gases. How it works is at the top, the lamp gets to a really hot temperature of up to 700 degrees Fahrenheit, and that heat draws out the noxious gases and burns them off. Thousands of tourists, and Londoners too, walk through Covent Garden every day, and most of them are completely unaware that many of the streets of Covent Garden are still lit by gaslight. I'm standing outside St Paul's Church, which is known as the Actors' Church, and was built in the 1630s. Behind me are two of the largest Rochesters remaining in London. Looking at their huge brackets, they actually held lamps that were even bigger than these originally. However, the current lamps, one dates from 1934, the other from the 1990s. In St Paul's Churchyard are these delightful octagonal lamps. They've recently been restored and I think they look absolutely splendid. One of my favourite lamps in London. We're by the toilets in Covent Garden, and who would have thought they're actually lit by gaslight? Both the ladies' and the gentlemen's toilets are lit by gaslight. I'm standing under a Grosvenor lamp. You can spot Grosvenor lamps because they have a cone shape with a really pretty filigree around the top. Grosvenors have been around since 1915. Before that, similar lamps were known as Paris lamps, and also some were known as Brixton lamps. I think they're absolutely lovely. In the quiet back streets of Westminster, you'll find Rochesters, like this lovely one that I'm standing under now. Rochesters were state-of-the-art in 1912. They are shadowless, superheated, storm-proof lamps, and they're still here today, over 100 years later. In Old Palace Yard, opposite the House of Parliament, you'll find these lovely globe lamps. They're all around what's known as the Palace of Westminster. In St James's, outside the home of Sir Francis Chichester, the first gentleman to circumnavigate the globe solo, we have a beautiful example of a Windsor lamp. Windsors were first introduced in 1898 with the upright incandescent mantle. Here we are in Horse Guards, and we've got a lovely row of these octagonal lamps. that have 16 mantled superheated clusters. So these were the state of the art in about 1920, and they stayed lighting our streets all the way up to the 1950s. And these ones are still here today, which is quite amazing. We're now on the Mall, and behind me is the lovely memorial to the Queen Mother and her husband, George VI. She died in 2002 at the age of 101, and the memorial was created by the royal family for her and her husband in 2009. The lamps around the memorial are all gas lamps, and they were designed by a Lincolnshire blacksmith called Don Barker. They have a lovely sort of Tiffany look to them as well. So not all lamps are Georgian and Victorian. We have some modern gas lamps here in London as well. Although the lamp heads have changed over time and evolved, some of the lampposts have remained the same. And I'm here now with one from George IV's reign. So George IV was king from 1820 to 1830. So this lamp has been here for over 200 years. Isn't that amazing? I'm outside Spencer House, which was built for the Spencer family between 1756 and 1766. Now originally, these beautiful wrought iron supports would have held an oil lamp. And also you might notice there are little snuffers here as well. The snuffers were to extinguish torches or links. So when you'd come home in an evening, guided by a link boy, you would extinguish the link under there. Today they have square Windsors on top, and if you look at the bottom of the Windsor, you'll see little chains, and at the bottom of the chains are little tags with on and off on them. And these were the tags that the Lamplighters pulled in the morning and the evening to turn the gas lamps on and off. At Tooting Broadway, Wandsworth Council have restored this beautiful lamp standard that has 5 Grosvenor lamps above it. I think it's absolutely delightful. I'm outside the Charlotte Street Hotel, which today is a beautiful 5-star boutique hotel. However, in the past, this building was the offices of Cottrell & Company, who manufactured dental instruments. And to impress their clients, they had these 2 amazing lamp standards installed around about the 1880s. They are a fine example of open flame gas lamps that you'll find around London today. The lamps are operated by remote control from inside the hotel, and they are actually my favourite gas lamps in the whole of London.
Thanks to Helen for showing us just a few of London's fantastic surviving gas lamps. As you now walk around London, we hope we have inspired you to seek out the amazingly varied types of gas lamps you can find if you look carefully. And once you begin to notice them, you'll perhaps agree that they give off a more delicate and pleasing light that is better suited to the capital's historic streets, squares and alleyways than the harsher electric lighting. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this history of London's gas lighting. Please don't forget to like the video and perhaps also leave a comment. Bye for now.